Electric Jam Podcast.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome to the Electric Jam Podcast. I'm Christopher, and I'm here with Richard. If you don't know who we are, you can check out our website in the description of the podcast. Electric Jam has guitar reviews, gear testing, and tons of info on recording. I have allergies. Richard, how are you?
I've got a little bit of a cold again, so but my youngest just started going to nursery, so it's going to be a lot of illness going around because those places are like weapons. Yeah, really germ places. I mean, COVID came out of a wet market, but I wouldn't be surprised if it came out of a chill kids nursery. The amount of crazy diseases you get from them is ridiculous.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I've been around a lot of kids too, doing photo shoots for schools. Mm-hmm. And yeah,
same. you just pick stuff up. It's like different strains of colds and viruses that you just don't get access to when you're kind of an adult, and then you go mix with people of a different age group, and particularly younger kids, and oh my god, it's ridiculous. I mean, I've had so many. I mean, the RSV, that's a respiratory.
That's bad.
It's really bad. I mean, my youngest son got it. He had to go into hospital when he was 2 weeks old with it. And I had it. And it's, oh my God, it's horrific. And then I had COVID about 2 weeks later. And then the flu. So, yeah, lots of illnesses with young'uns. But it's okay. It's all good. It's all good for the immune system. Keep it on its toes.
Yeah.
But I've got a bit of a froggy throat. So you'll have to excuse me. And a bit of a sniffle. So.
Yeah, same. So if you hear us sniffling,
it's going to be a snotty one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a snotty one today for sure.
What's that thing that people have where they get up on like noises? What's it called?
ASMR.
Yeah, so this is going to be like a really niche ASMR podcast. So if you like the sound of snot and coughing and gunky throats, then you're gonna have a great time.
You're gonna love this. Yeah. So a lot has happened, which is funny because over the past few weeks, we've pretty much started every podcast, I think, saying, especially last week, we were saying how there just hasn't been a whole lot of news. Like nothing really big has happened, like we had some Schecter drops and stuff like that, but we didn't really have anything like a landmark thing that happened. And then all of a sudden, Boss, out of nowhere, puts on their Instagram, new katana is coming. And you and I started following it. And there's a couple things that's kind of weird about it. The first thing is it's called the Gen 3. When all of the other ones were the Mark 1 and the Mark 2. So instead of going to the Mark 3, we're the Generation 3. I thought that was like a weird...
Yeah, that kind of implies
it's
a
weird
big step up, isn't it?
For it,
Yeah, breaking convention. It kind of implies that it's a big step forwards, but from what I can gather from talking to you before, it's actually not that different from the two.
Well, yeah, we've got some coverage on it on the website already, and we'll have a full, personal review after I've spent a little bit more time with it. But so far, first impressions... And I'm just going to be real with everybody. I have a katana. I love it. I use it to record. I use it for guitar lessons. I would use it live if I were playing live right now. I think the thing is a beast. I have the Mark II. I'm not going to buy the Gen 3 because I don't think that there's enough difference.
So what's kind of like the key takeaways with it? What does it do? What does it have that the 2 doesn't have?
It has more storage space, so I think that's cool. There's more storage, but other than that, there's a new channel called Pushed, and the Pushed channel is exactly what it sounds like. It's a pushed tube amp, and I don't know. I guess think of a Vox.
Yeah.
Like a little Vox AC-15 or something that Brian May would use, really cranked up and getting hot. That's what that new channel is. So it kind of closes the gap between the clean, because I mean that is kind of a problem. Like I go from my clean tone to the crunch tone, and the crunch tone is this huge leap in distortion. So there's nothing really in between. So now there's like an in-between tone for like, I don't know, blues dads. They would definitely enjoy that, you know.
But there's nothing major, like major, like kind of like wow, like a sort of flagship feature that would differentiate it from the two.
No.
Because I've been thinking of getting one. I've been thinking of buying one. And now the 3's out, I'm kind of like, I suppose that's kind of the market they're going for, really. It's people that don't own any of them. So they're like, well, you know, there's plenty of people that haven't got the Mark 1 or the Mark 2. So if we do the 3, you know, they're going to buy it. They're going to hear about the 2, that it's good. And then they go, well, I'll just get the 3 because it kind of does everything the 2 does, but with a few little extras.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's kind of the market for it. Now, there are some people that are like just, I don't know, they're really into the katana. I know some players that own 2 of them because you can link them in stereo, and that's still a feature that the new ones have. So if you have a Mark II, you could link it to a Mark III and then run all of your effects in stereo, and that's pretty cool. But yeah, I think the market really is for the newer players, because I think people who already have a katana, like myself, and I'm happy with it, like I don't see the point in spending it.
Okay, so
$400.
For anyone who's listening, like who's looking to maybe get an amp soon, what's the difference between the Mark 1, the Mark II, and the 3? Because obviously the Mark 1's going to be quite cheap now. You could probably pick that up kind of secondhand for not much cash, I imagine. Ditto the 2, because that's been around for a while too. So if you're in the market, like what are you going to be missing out on like the cheaper you go?
You're going to be missing out on that extra channel on the new one. And as far as the Mark 1 and the Mark II, there wasn't huge leaps between those two. There were a couple of added effects, and I think also storage banks and a variation switch. So technically you have more than just the 4 or 5 amps that are on there. If you hit the variation switch, technically you have 10 or 12. Okay. So that's the difference between the Mark 1 and the Mark II. But the Mark IIs right now are, you can't really find the Mark 1 new anymore. The Mark IIs are on blowout right now at Guitar Center. Like they're basically giving them, you know, like, did you buy a pack of picks and some strings? Here, take a katana with you, you know? yeah, for like $20. Okay, that's interesting, because I really have been looking at them seriously getting one, and then they dropped the Katana 3, and I was like, ooh, do I pay full chop for that or just get a cheaper 2? I think I'm going to get the 2, you know, and save some cash. I mean, the 2 is fantastic.
Well, actually, scratch that. If anyone from Boss is listening and you want to send us the 3, one to me and one to Chris, we'll do proper detailed reviews of it, and then that will save both of us a lot of money.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'd review it, you know, impartially, and we wouldn't do you any favors. But you know, if anyone is listening, then feel free to reach out, because I definitely need a katana in my life. I just don't know whether it's going to be the 3 or the 2. And
we just wanted to point out to you, Boss, that we do have one of the most comprehensive guides on the Boss Katana that you can find on the internet.
Yeah, the sneaky amps. That one's everyone loves that article. It's been doing business for a long time.
So that's the thing with the Gen 3, though. I don't think that you can do the sneaky amps trick with the Gen 3.
Oh, okay. So they closed that loophole then.
I think so. So that's something else to consider, I guess.
Okay, well, that's definitely something we need to refresh on that article then, because once you've had a play around with the Gen 3, then we need to find out if you can do the sneaky amps, because loads of people are proper interested in that. It's like a really cool little thing, so that would definitely be interesting to know.
Yeah, I'm going to find out next week. So, yeah, if it doesn't do it, then we'll have to update that article. You're right. Because that's...
Okay, so So as of right now, this is the Katana still the amp you'd recommend to like the majority of guitar players who aren't, pros, like people just normal dudes playing guitars.
I would even recommend them to some pros.
Yeah, but you know what I mean, like the average guy,
yeah.
the dude that's just plays, wants a good sound, some effects, and just something to kind of mess around with at home, and maybe do some recording.
Yeah, I mean, it has every effect that Boss makes in a pedal. So anything that you want is literally right there. I mean, you don't even have to plug it up to your computer. I think I plugged mine up twice. One was to do the Sneaky Amps article. I had to plug it up for that. But other than that, I plugged it up the first time. I set it the way that I want it. I have 8 channels. And all 8 channels do something different. And that's all I need. Like, I have a lead channel. I have like a doom stoner rock kind of fuzz channel. And a couple of clean tones for like shoegaze and stuff like that. Other than that, I've never really tweaked it.
And you can run, you can run it just like a traditional amp. You can just run pedals on it and stuff and all that kind of jazz.
Exactly. Yeah, the 100 watt Mark II, Mark 1, and Gen 3. The 100 watt has an effects loop. So if you run pedals, the 100 watt is exactly what you need.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm just trying to cover all the bases in case anyone's listening is sort of like, I quite like the idea of an amp, but they might have done something like I did a while ago where, you buy something like the Spark amp because it looks good and the marketing's very slick. And then it actually turns out to be not that good. So,
well, and speaking of marketing, it's kind of funny that Line 6 dropped the new Catalyst.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
And,
it's like Apple and Samsung, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the thing is that everybody compared the two in the beginning. And I think that our article is one of the only ones where I said that there's really no comparison. Do they look the same? Yes. Are they aimed at the same kind of market? Sort of. Do they operate the same? No. Not at all. And I covered that in our article, and I think that one's pretty popular also.
Yeah, it is. So what I mean, anyone listening, so what, between the two of them, what's the kind of key takeaways?
Well, the biggest takeaway is if you're going to be using it live, I think the Katana edges out a little bit in the competition on that because it has a different type of power amp. It has a Class AB power amp, which is what you would usually find on, like big tube amps. So they're naturally going to cut through better on stage than something that's a Class D. And most modeling amps are Class D. And I think that's still what the Catalyst is working with. The Catalyst CX is the new one. The sounds are similar. The Catalyst, I think, is more towards, I don't want to say not metal people, because it does have a good high gain channel, but there's a lot more clean options.
Okay, so it's more kind of varied. It's more kind of like an everyman's kind of amp.
Yeah, I mean, like if you like to play blues and jazz and stuff like that, then the Catalyst, that might be more up your alley than the Katana, because the Katana has the famous brown channel, which is based on EVH's tone. So that's like super high gain. And even the crunch channel gets pretty heavy too. So yeah, the Katana kind of fills that gap that people who want that, they can go for that. And then the Catalyst is more for, I'm not really into metal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what's the kind of price differences between these two things?
I think the Catalyst is $50 more. I had them pulled up earlier here on my computer. Yeah.
Because the Katana's always been really well priced.
The Catalyst is a little bit more expensive right now. Not the old ones. You can get the first generation of the Catalyst for pretty cheap now. But yeah, the katana's always been super cheap. Like, to the point to where you buy it and you kind of feel like you made a mistake. Because I think I paid $400 for mine. That was 2 years ago. And I was like, I think I made a mistake. And then I played it. I was like, nope, this thing's great. Still use it.
Well, value for money it's hard to come by. And when you do, you almost feel like you kind of stumbled across it. Maybe you shouldn't have. You sort of like, well, what is this? There's some kind of secret, or there's got to be a catch, or there's got to be something that's going to
that's how I felt.
Ruin it for me. Inevitably down the 2 weeks later when I suddenly find out it doesn't do this one thing and I'm like, oh, for God's sake.
No, that's kind of how I felt about the katana, because it was under $500. And I was like, are all of these reviews for real, No,
yeah.
And I got it.
You never know, do you?
Yeah, exactly. But then I got
even more so now with AI overviews. Christ. It's just terrible.
So that's something that I noticed when I was on the road this past month. I stayed in a lot of hotels, and when you're staying in hotels and you're waiting between different events, you have a lot of time in your hands to watch YouTube. And I've noticed that there are a lot of AI scripted YouTube videos now.
Yeah. It's everywhere. It's completely all-encompassing now, to the point where I'd like to say if you're a site that doesn't use AI, then you'll win out. But it's next to impossible now to really do anything because Google's algorithm has become so ridiculous. Our site, Electric Jam's been absolutely obliterated by it. Just the visibility of our articles, which are in depth, well written. They're shared all over Twitter, all over Reddit. But Google, for some reason, doesn't think they're good enough to be showing up in their search. But then it will quite happily put up, an completely AI generated article where we used to be for something like a review as well, which I find is so insidious, because a review is something where people are going to part with money, potentially a lot of money. If you're talking about gear and guitars, amps, average is going to be about $400. And
right,
it's just so a combination of these AI websites which are kind of taking over the SERPs. A SERP is a search engine results page, by the way, just an SEO jargon for you. And then you've got kind of Google's AI overviews, which has been, from what I can gather, because I'm in the UK, so we don't have it here, but from what I can gather looking at Twitter, it's been an absolute shit show from the moment it went live, telling people to drink urine, informing people that cockroaches can crawl up your penis and 10 cockroaches crawl up your penis in your lifetime. Just the most ridiculous stuff you've ever seen. You go on Twitter and type in Google AI overviews, you'll see some truly nightmarish stuff. But the problem is, it's all that content it's giving you, serving you up with these AI overviews, is content it's scraped from sites like ours and other independent publishers and big publishers as well to provide those answers. And then it's kicked us all out of its search engine. So it's basically stolen all of our content and then kicked us out of its search engine, which is,
this has been my experience with it. And I showed it. I have a Google phone, so I guess I'm part of the problem, but
yes.
I love it. It's so easy to use. But the generative AI that it does for a Google search, it gives you the information first, then it does list the websites where it pulled those the little snippets of information from. And often I have seen us pop up on there, and then you can click on our article. But yeah, you're kind of stealing our information. And the thing is about AI, and when it comes to reviews, especially when it comes to amps and guitars and pedals and stuff like that, first of all, it's very subjective. Second of all, that's a hands-on experience that you have to have as a person. So I can tell you how the guitar feels, how heavy the guitar is, what the neck is shaped like.
Yeah. But the problem with all of this is that Google's algorithm, despite all its, saying, oh, we can assess quality and, eat and all that kind of stuff. Google can't read. So the algorithm can't read. It doesn't read the articles. It's all based on math. And all this illusion about, you need to demonstrate authoritativeness and trustworthiness and expertise and all that nonsense. It can't enforce that. So it's been inundated with AI spun content over the last 2 years, to the point where it's having to serve and crawl more. So every time it has to crawl a web page, it probably costs it like, a thousandth of a cent to do it. And, say in 2020 or 2021, it's the money it was costing it to crawl the internet was probably, say it's like, I don't know, $50 million a day, right? The AI, a huge influx of content that's now available there, has increased that cost tenfold. So it's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. It's trying to sort of clean the SERPs up and get rid of this rubbish content. It's also trying to do it itself with AI answers, which is completely nonsensical because it doesn't work. These large language models that people are calling AI they're just word spinners. That's it. They're not. There's no thought. There's no intelligence. It's just spinning words based on math that it knows should go together based on some training data that it's had. That's it. That's why it can't give you an opinion. That's why it can't write compelling copy. It's not interesting to read. It can't do anything creative. All it can do, it's great for stuff like how far is the Earth from the moon? How big is the moon? How much does the moon weigh? Like standard facts that are basically black and white, or things like coding. It's really good for that. So you can say like, write me a HTML script for a guitar chord calculator. So I type in the chord E and you tell me all the chord progressions I do it. Stuff like that, it's great because they're based in, there's no right or wrong answer. You basically, it's either right or it's wrong. But for something subjective or anything creative, it's terrible and it doesn't know what to do. But the really ironic thing with this is that it will pretend it does. And that's the problem, because these models are now being rolled out into everything from like iOS to Android to search results pages. And no one seems to care, particularly these big tech companies, that they will quite happily hallucinate and provide false information, potentially dangerous information. And this puts people like Google in seriously hot water, because if before, Google is obviously responsible for the results it displays. But if someone follows the advice of an article they read and it ends up killing them or harming them, who are they going to sue? They're not going to sue Google. They sue the publisher. But now Google is becoming a publisher. So it then places itself in, the amount of lawsuits. How many people use Google? How many idiots are there in the world? How many lawsuits do you think there's going to be against it in the next 12 months from people that have hurt themselves by following advice from a stupid AI model that doesn't know its arse from its elbow?
Well, I mean, especially you're talking about drinking urine, like urine therapy.
This wasn't even that. It was something. It wasn't even that. It was I can't remember what it was, but it was I think it was how can I get rid of kidney stones? And it was like drink urine or something. So I don't know. It was something like that. I saw it on Reddit or Twitter. But it's bonkers that they've got 20 years of brand reputation for being a trustworthy source of information for the vast majority of people on planet Earth. And they're basically willing to just throw it all away to for this. It's insane. I have no idea what the hell is going on at that company, at the top of that company. But everyone's drinking the same Kool-Aid in big tech, seemingly, because these AI large language models, which what they are, or word spinners, are becoming, they're present in everything now. And music, is going to be the next thing. Well, it's already happening.
Well, it already has.
Yeah.
So the big story today is AI and music. And the whole topic came up because Motley Crue released a song called Dogs of War. And it's not terrible. It's not great.
I thought it was pretty crap.
It's a song, you know.
It's definitely a song, yeah.
But people have accused them of using AI to write it. So that's the thing.
What part?
The entire song.
Oh, right. I was going to say the lyrics, but it doesn't require any creative input in that
could
part.
Have been, it could have been that, yeah. The thing is, I'm checking out different websites. They're saying that, you know, you can't know for sure, but some people are thinking that it's completely made by AI. And
right.
When they say that, they're not saying that Motley Crue put in a prompt and then went into the studio and did what that prompt said.
Oh, so they're just implying that they listened to Motley Crue, then make a song that sounds like Motley Crue.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, they could. That's already happening now. I mean, Rick Beato did a video on this, talking about how, and it's the same way as I was talking about a minute ago with the large language models like ChatGPT, Claude. They all work the same way. They're all based on the same model, which is effectively in that context, it's with words. So you train it on a large data set of information, and then it knows through by entity linking and things like that. It's very complicated stuff, but effectively it knows how to write stuff. So it will know if you ask it to write an article about X, Y, and Z, it will know the correct words to put in the right order based on the data set that it's got its hands on. So it can't create anything new, though. That's the thing. It can't create something new, and it can't deliver its own opinion. All it can do is rehash what's already been said. So long term, when you apply this model to things like music or filmmaking, it's obviously going to be a car crash, because it's just anathema to creativity. I mean, AI has its place in things like business applications and workflows and stuff like that. I mean, I use it for stuff, but I don't ever use it for anything that people are going to interact with on a personal level. So people reading stuff that I'm writing, or a review, or anything like that. But for processing stuff or coding, or, you know, assisting with problems with like your hosting, or like, oh, this, you know, how do I do this in WordPress? How do I set up a custom template and add in a filter, or write me code to do X, Y, and Z on this WordPress page? It's great for that, but anything creative at all, it's terrible. And if you are somebody who is creative, whether you're a writer or a musician, you need to really stay clear of it, because it'll bring out the worst in you. It'll make you lazy. It'll stop you. I mean, we already have a point now where these AI models you can train to make music. So you can show it the Beatles and say, write a song by the Beatles that sounds like the Beatles, and it will sound just like the Beatles. But is that good? Or
I don't think it is.
And also, it's copyright as well. I mean, if you're an artist and a band, I mean, what's to stop a label taking the 3 most popular metal bands in the world, or the 3 most, you know, up and coming, and basically training an AI model on them, and then creating kind of like a Gorillaz style band that doesn't, well, obviously the Gorillaz exist and they're great, but I mean that kind of, you know, it's all animated, so they're not particularly, there's no actual person involved with it, and it just becomes just like a label digital asset that makes music for no money. Doesn't cost them anything.
I'm going to go ahead and say that that's going to happen within the next year.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's already going on now with, like, you know, in popular music, people just going, you know, these are my best tracks. Shit out some more that are as good as these or better.
Well, so I've played around with it with ChatGPT anyway, and I've played around with it a little bit to kind of see if it can give you, I guess, hooky chord progressions and melodies, and it can. And that's kind of the full extent that I've used AI. And I didn't use it for a song. I was just seeing if it could happen, you know?
Yeah.
But what it pulled up was basically Desmond Child's catalog.
Right.
And I could tell because the chord progression, I think it was a 1-3-6-4.
Pure Des.
And that's Desmond Child's thing.
Yeah.
Heaven is a Place on Earth by Belinda Carlisle. Bon Jovi, You Give Love a Bad Name.
Yeah.
He wrote both of those songs. And
yeah,
they're exactly the same.
I mean, that's what I mean. It's a plagiarism machine. That's effectively what it is. I mean, I have a tech site that I work on as well, and I've been writing about this a lot because there's so many legal aspects to it that just aren't addressed, that haven't been addressed, and aren't even that are potentially massive to do with copyright. Rights. There's a recent one with Scarlett Johansson suing OpenAI for giving ChatGPT a voice that was similar to hers. Like they asked her if they could use her voice, and she said no. And then they basically just created one that sounded pretty much identical to her, and she wasn't very happy about that. Obviously, I mean, you wouldn't be. So there's a big disconnect at the moment, I think, between like it's big tech like Apple, Google, have always been, even though they're not benevolent forces in society, they've always been perceived as relatively benevolent because they've been giving us access to like useful technology like iPhones and iPads and Macs and PCs and Windows and Chrome and Gmail and that kind of stuff. But their whole model's predicated on data and your personal data and harvesting it in any way they can. I mean, Google is terrible for that, that kind of stuff. So with these new AI models and how people are using them, like the profiling that can be done is insane. I mean, OpenAI isn't even technically legal in Europe because it has no way for a user to find out what data OpenAI has on you from using ChatGPT. European law is that you should be able to get access to the data that a company has on you and have the option to delete it, but that's not provided. They just kind of go, yeah, whatever. Google's being taken to court every other day for something or other. You know, it's getting fined. It's got a trial with the DOJ at the moment, ongoing. But they just give them fines. They'll give them a fine of like $200 million. And it's like, that's Google. They'd literally just get the change out of their pocket and give you that.
Yeah.
And with this AI stuff, it's getting worse and worse. And it's going to get worse and worse to the point where it's going to saturate everything. And it's going to... And people, I don't think people want it either. This is the thing. It's like people go, oh, you're just being a Luddite or you whatever. But this is different because it's already taking people's jobs. It's already destroying people's livelihoods. And it's not, because it's a machine and it's synthetic, it's not real and it's not creating anything new. It's almost like putting a bottleneck on innovation, because it's stopping people who want to do stuff from actually working, because some CEOs are like, oh, we can save a load of money by just getting rid of a load of staff and just automating this with AI. And it's like, yeah, you can. But then how do you make that process better? You need people in there figuring that kind of stuff out, because an AI just does whatever you tell it, but it's only as good as the prompt you give it.
Right.
So you need to have better prompts to get better outcomes. So,
well, I mean, I have a friend
stagnation.
named... It is, yeah. I have a friend named Aaron. Shout out, Aaron, if you're listening. And he's got a company called Lost in Time. And he does art in the style of traditional anime. like anime from the 80s and the 90s, like think Robotech.
Yeah. I mean, this is a great
like
example of something that's going to be being systematically destroyed by DALL-E and other things.
Well, his biggest client just dropped him. And he's like, why? You know, I've been working with you for 3 years and I draw characters for you and comics and I've never missed a deadline. Like,
yeah.
But what's wrong? And they're like, well, you know, DALL-E does the same thing. Type in anime character and it does the same thing. And he lost his biggest client.
Yeah,
which is messed up. That's insane. That's crazy. And it's gotten to the point now with music that there's several mastering programs and mixing programs like Lander. Lander's the biggest offender.
Yeah.
And what they do is they mix and master your song for you. But from what I could tell, it just kind of makes it louder. Like it doesn't really enhance dynamics the way that a real person behind the desk would.
Yeah,
you know?
That's the thing. This is what I keep coming back to, because they call it AI, but it's not. It's just, well, the context of most people can understand it is a word spinner. That's how ChatGPT works. It has a data set and it knows from that data set how certain things work, like sentences and paragraphs, numbers, maths, whatever. But it doesn't think for itself. It can't create anything new. It can't listen in the context of Lander to a piece of music and go, okay, I understand that this needs to be better and I could tweak that bit, because it has no experience of working on other albums or different genres of music. It's just an algorithm. And they're like a black box as well. You can't really get inside them and they just kind of do what they want. You give them a prompt and it'll just do something and that's it. So you have to get it to do it again. So,
well, they make really bold claims when it comes to their mastering process.
Yeah, they always do.
I think it's honestly just a cookie cutter limiter.
Yeah.
They put the limiter on it. They slam it as hard as they possibly can against a brick wall until it can't get any louder. And that's all that Lander does for you.
Yeah. It's because we obviously have the mastering course that we do, which is a full-on getting your hands dirty, learning how to actually do it from the inside out. And that's, if you care, I think it's like anything. If you care about art, if you care about music, if you care about the written word, these tools, I'm not saying that AI is bad, because I use it a lot for my workflows and stuff at work, and it speeds things up. It's great for speeding up boring tasks, things that you used to do. Like, for instance, if I'm doing any kind of SEO related stuff for any of the sites I have, ChatGPT and Claude have just 10x'd the speed at which I can do things. And it's great, but I would never, because you get sites that are just pumping out. They just have like feeding an AI model just keywords, and it's just crapping out articles, just left, right, and center, just like spamming the internet basically with nonsense.
Yeah, and just like those YouTube videos, they're just bland, boring, vanilla information that you can find from a Google search. Well, there's no personal
you used
touch.
to be able to, and now you're gonna get the same treatment when you go to Google if you're in the States, because you're gonna get an AI answer shoved in your face there. So the best thing to do is to vote with your money and not use them. Like, stop using Google. Obviously, stop using Google is kind of a hard thing to do, but I actually did. I made a principal point earlier this year after what they'd done to our site and what they're doing with their SERP and their algorithm. And I mean, they put tens of thousands of businesses out of business this year. And most people aren't aware of this, but they've literally destroyed the livelihood of millions of people with these updates they've been doing to their search engine, which is basically all predicated on the idea that they wanted to bring these AI answers to search. They had to get rid of a lot of stuff, meaning, the original content producers whose content they effectively stole for their AI answers from the SERP. And it's really bad. It's a really awful thing to see a company like Google do, because I know Google's a bit, iffy with data and what they do with data and that kind of thing. But it's a company they've always been like really innovative, and they have changed the world. in the last 20 years, more so than any other company in terms of the access of information. And if I was at Google's PR company, or if I was high up in Google, I'd be like, look, everyone's talking about this AI stuff and all the shareholders want us to get into it, but it's not reliable. It's not trustworthy. You can't use it for anything important because you have to check to make sure it's correct. So what would you use to check it? You use Google to check it because we're reliable. We provide reliable search. We provide reliable information to people who need access.
And by that point, you've spent the same amount of time. So like, let's say if you are writing an article and then you plug it into ChatGPT, well, now you're going to have to go through that entire article and proofread
fact check it
to see if that info is even correct, which oftentimes when I've played with it, it has been very, very, very wrong. So you're spending the same. You still got to research.
But my point is, Google should have just been like, rather than crapping their pants about OpenAI and ChatGPT, which is what they did, and they had this knee-jerk reaction because it's the first time they've ever been remotely threatened by another company, and they basically go, "Oh, we've got to do something quick, so let's roll out Gemini, Bard, then Gemini, then AI answers over in the search because everybody wants it." When they don't, they could have just gone, "No, we're going to become the search engine you can trust," and double down on what they're good at, which is basically curating the internet and putting the best information in front of people that's reliable. That's what it does. I don't know why they're kind of moving away from that, because they think they're somehow the people want this when the system doesn't work and it's built on flaky technology. I mean, it's impressive technology, but it's not trustworthy. And you can't have something running that billions of people are accessing every day that isn't 100% watertight. And it's not even close. I'd say it's not even halfway there. But they've run it out anyway, which is mental.
So this is my prediction. I think we're going to have to deal with the AI stuff for like maybe another year. And I think people are going to get sick of it. Because I already know so many people that aren't creative at all that hate it. They can't stand it.
The only people I know that use it are people who use it in like a work as a tool for getting boring tasks done. And in that sense, it's great. And I feel like that's kind of what it was created for. This whole ChatGPT thing of being like a content writer it was never its sole purpose. It's just something that I think OpenAI were like, yeah, we can market this. And to be fair, it's probably not even them, because its APIs were being used by AI writing companies like long before they released ChatGPT to the public. So I think OpenAI's goal, it's always a bit murky, is to just create an AI model that can be used in the different types of applications. Once the API access was out of the bag, so people could access the core technology and run it in applications, like all bets are off, because it's capitalism and someone's going to come along and be like, this will write an article for you in 3 minutes, 1,000-word article in 3 minutes. And, and then you sell that to people and people buy it and they make, tens of millions of dollars. And then the internet just gets full of just utter dross. And then Google has to come along and then do like a fire and brimstone update, which has tons of collateral damage to other sites who weren't using it. And it's just a mess. And then they've gone and done this AI overviews thing, which is just, to me, it's absolutely bonkers, because you can't undo bad press. That's the thing. Like, you can't undo, once people don't trust you anymore, that's it.
Right.
And Google has been the trusted source of information. I mean, people say, well, Google it. How long before that stops? That's 20 years of earned credibility. And they're basically betting that entire business on something that everybody who knows anything about these large language models knows that they don't work properly. They're not reliable. They hallucinate. They even have, if you use like Claude or ChatGPT, they even have a disclaimer saying the information here might not be factually correct. So, but Google's running that in its search. So, and Google's model is not as good as OpenAI's or Claude's. So it's a real mess. And with music, I mean, yeah, it's really depressing. And I think it's one of those things where people have to have principles about what they're doing. But you know, then you have bands like the Eagles, and they'll probably do AI music, because if anyone's going to do it, it'd be the Eagles.
So, I was thinking so hard about what I was about to say that almost went past me. But I haven't watched Rick Beato's video on AI yet.
It's interesting. He's like talking about saying,
I wonder if he's noticed yet. I wonder if he's noticed that it's been used now for about a year, especially in Nashville. Because when he does those top 10 countdowns or the top 20 Spotify countdowns, he often says to himself, oh, it's using the same chord progression. Oh, this one's using that same chord progression. And I don't know if he's put it together yet, but that's exactly what they've been using for pop music. And for these top 20 hits. That's why all of the top 20 hits sound so similar. Like, they can be completely different genres, but then when you break them down to their core, like Rick does.
Yeah. But I mean, most pop music is based around similar chords. So you could argue this is kind of a good get out of jail free card. Like, well, pop music's based around the same 3 chords usually. Yeah. But I know what you mean. It could be done very easily, and there'd be plausible deniability with it as well.
Well, some of them, like Rick in one of his videos, said, well, that's a very interesting progression. And then 2 songs later, it was the same progression. He was like, people are using weird progressions these days. And they are using different chord progressions, because I think if anyone is using this, it's the music industry.
Oh, totally. I mean, like I said before, there's going to be bands coming out that you'll suddenly just start hearing all about, and they won't have an identity. They'll be shrouded in mystery, maybe like animated or something, or online only, or TikTok only band or something stupid like that. And it'll all just be, they won't be real. It'll just be AI music that's basically trained on all the most popular music in a particular genre, and they'll just be pumped out to print money and sell merchandise.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But here's my second prediction, and I think this is a good way to close everything. My second prediction is that there's going to be a huge rebellion against this.
I hope so.
First of all, in the music industry, people are going to want original content and interesting content. And this time that we're going through right now, where every song kind of sounds the same in the top 20 charts, that's going to go away, because people are going to get really, really tired of it really, really quick. So if they are using AI in these big studios with these big stars, you might want to stop.
Well, there's that too. And there's also
going to be a rebellion. I feel like something like the 90s when grunge came in. It's not going to be like grunge, but it's not going to be
cool. That's what I mean. It'll be the antithesis of like good music. It's AI nonsense. It'd be like in the 90s when they don't even write their own music, that kind of thing.
Well, it can kind of be like the 80s, because in the 80s you had all of those hair metal bands that were, cookie cutter copies of each other. And that's what grunge changed. And now the cookie cutter copies is all of the AI program music, stuff like this Motley Crue song and stuff like that Rick breaks down on the top 20 Spotify hits and whatever. I think the next big music rebellion, because, happens every 16 years or so, according to generation guides, I think the next big one is coming up, and I think it's going to be rallying against that kind of stuff, because the 90s is already like cool again, which is so weird to me.
Yeah, I get that, but this has already kind of been happening in Hollywood and in the art industry as well. And it doesn't. This is the thing I was saying earlier about big tech and it being its insidious role that it plays in society, because it has enough money and enough power and enough control to basically make something normal, even when it's not, and even when people don't want it. That's the problem. It has too much influence. It has too much power. And when you have that much influence and power, you can just sway people, and people just accept it and go, oh, yeah, that's kind of how it is now, because it's everywhere. There's nothing I can do about it. I mean, they have more power than governments. The governments can't stop this. They can't. They try and step in. The EU does a lot of stuff with this AI thing at the moment, and has done for the last 18 months. But even then, all they can do is just, slap them with some kind of like fines. But to really send a message, it needs to be something punitive. It needs to be a figure that is going to, a headline figure, like a $100 billion fine or something, because these models are trained on other people's work. This is the problem. This is the thing that a lot of people don't understand or get, that there's no accreditation and you're not rewarded. There's no financial reward for them stealing your content or your skills and passing it off as their own. They're making billions, but you don't get anything. Now that's not fair. That's not how things work. It's theft of intellectual property. It's theft of creativity. And it's a really bad place to be. And the fact that companies like Apple, who, like to swan around and call themselves a liberal arts company, is now starting to get on the AI train as well, with something similar. And that really tasteless advert it did for its new iPad, where it was like crushing musical instruments and stuff. It's disgusting. People need to just have a hard look at themselves. And I think as the public sentiment towards this changes and more people become aware of just how insidious and gross it is, and the fact that it's just stealing people's content and ideas, there'll be more of a backlash, and then that will then be reflected in the share prices. Because Google's share price is just going up and up at the moment, but I think the public sentiment around the changes it's made to its search engine, which are now even my mum noticed it. She's like, what's wrong with Google these days? It used to be so good. It's rubbish now. And I was like, okay. So the cracks are starting to show. And as more and more people start to realize this, they'll start looking elsewhere. Like Bing will start increasing it's market share, which it has done this year.
I was about to say it already has. Yeah.
Yeah, then the share price will start coming down a little bit. It's a real... There's going to be some landmark case at some point in the next 12 months that will give them all pause, I think. Like this DOJ one with Google's pretty big. There's a couple going on in Europe, but it's because there should be an accreditation. That's the thing. You can't just steal people's content. And also, this is the thing that really gets me, is that they're stealing like big publishers' content. Like, you don't mess with the media, really. I mean, the media can destroy you. Like, you take the New York Times or something. If they basically cause New York Times to lose 70% of their digital traffic, right, because people are getting all their answers from AI summaries or whatever, and they feel they've been hard done to by this, do you think they're going to take that line down? They're going to litigate, they'll sue them, and then they will make it their life's mission to destroy Google as a company through their newspapers. It's this year is going to be, it's going to be mental, because these companies media publishing companies will not lie down and take it. Same with like artists as well, like musicians. And there's always going to be people that want to game the system and, do it for free. But you're going to be hampered by that in the long run anyway, because you can't create something if you don't know something about it, or you don't care about it, or you don't have the skills to do it. And AI is not a shortcut for that. It's not a shortcut to creativity in any way, shape, or form. It's just a tool that you can use to speed things up when you know what you're doing. But it's not something that can replace talent or vision or ideas. And that applies to everything: music, writing, film, you name it.
Yep. I think we're going to see a huge backlash. I'm pretty positive about it. I'm pretty positive about most things, but I'm pretty positive about that. I'm already sick of it. was mildly intrigued, I guess, when it first.
It's in everything. That's the thing. Everything's got
happening.
AI now. I'm just waiting for my next pod vape to come through and be like, with AI. And it's like, oh God, why have I got AI in my vape?
No, it's true. It's everywhere, and people are going to get sick of it.
Yeah.
It's a trend, and hopefully it dies really soon.
Should we talk about the new Pallbearer album before we finish?
Yeah. What did you wrote the review? Usually I write them, and
I dusted off my keyboard.
What'd you think?
Well, it's kind of an interesting one because I really like Pallbearer, and I have done since they came out because their first two albums were like fantastic. They kind of just
they're the only band that can cover Typo Negative.
Oh, that song is brilliant as well.
And it's
such a good cover. Yeah, I mean, I prefer it to the original, but I know that's heresy, but there you go. That's me. So when I first listened to it, because we had a pre-release version from Earache to listen to, like the press version. And I had it and I listened to it. I think we got it 2 days before we were allowed to publish the review. And obviously everyone gets to publish their review as soon as the embargo lifts. They're like, go, go, go. But I was like, I can't, I'm not ready. I listened to it a few times and I was like, I felt like I was missing something. And I didn't want to just arbitrarily just go, oh yeah, it's all right. It's not as good as the first album or the second album. Blah, 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 blah. So I took a bit of time to listen to it, spent more time listening to it. And it like grew on me a lot. It's very different. It's way more accessible than their earlier stuff. So if you can, I always think there's basically like two camps of Pallbearer fans. There's kind of like the pre-2020 fans, so like the first two albums, and then there's sort of like the post-2020, which is, the ones that come after 2020, when it was the first time they really changed gears with the sound, the music, because it was kind of quite riff heavy and more like traditional kind of heavy doom. And then like Forgotten Days, it became a little bit more accessible and a little more kind of focused on sort of melody. I mean, they've always been very melodic, but it was more kind of leaning towards, you could put it on somebody that doesn't necessarily like doom or metal would be like, oh, this is good. I quite like this. And Minds Burn Alive is like, it's progression from that. So if you're into the heavier stuff, you're probably not going to dig it very much. But it really grew on me as an album, and that's to me is usually a sign of an album that I'm going to love for a long, long time, because all the albums I like the most, when I first heard them, I've kind of been like, oh, okay, I need to listen to that again, and I'll go through it again. And the funny thing about this album is that there's no standout tracks on it. Like the sum total is like greater than the parts, if that makes sense. And you have to kind of listen to it all the way through to kind of get the full picture.
Album.
Yeah, it's an album's album. It's like kind of like it's a concept album. And there's just lots of bits on it. Like Endless Place is probably my favorite track on the album. Not just because it's got a saxophone in it, but I just think it's a really good place, and the album's really well paced. And it kind of like starts really slow, then it kind of builds up, and then it swells, and then it crashes down, and then it does it again. And it's very like shoegazy, I think. Like I said in the review, I was like, it's called shoegaze doom because it's very just I can't think of a riff from it. It's sort of like they're building like sonic soundscapes with the guitars and the lead and the vocals.
That's what I was going to say. It's more like ethereal. It's more ambient.
Like post-rock, shoegazy, kind of that sort of vibe. Like kind of like Mogwai.
There's still heavy
it's got a real Mogwai vibe to it. Not in terms of its sounds, but the approach to the music, where it's kind of ambling and it kind of meanders through like chords and builds up, and it's got really heavy bits in it, but they're kind of they're not front and center like they used to be, like the big riffs. Like they're like a crescendo, and you kind of move towards them, and then you're rewarded with it. And then as like after getting through the journey of that song, and they all build really well. And his vocals are quite different on this one too. Like he's kind of I feel like he kind of stepped outside of his comfort zone quite a lot on this album.
I agree.
Because he's a good singer. He's not an amazing singer, but he's a decent singer in a doom metal band. But usually it's quite heavy and distorted. You can, if you can sing in tune, you can kind of hide in the mix a little bit. But there's tunes on this one where it's, like the first track kind of, to me, sounded very like Pink Floyd-esque with the vocals. And almost
and
a bit
the
like
harmonies
Opeth.
And stuff.
Yeah, and like kind of like Opeth, Deliverance, that kind of album, where it's just super mellow, super thin sounding, and it's just his voice and a really sort of mellow guitar. And when I first listened to it through, I was like, oh, this would be like, they kind of missed a trick here, because if I was producing this album and I heard this one song, I'd be like, you know what, you get like some really nice acoustic guitars in there, some synths, and it's really beautiful kind of setup for that tune. But then when you take it in the context of the rest of the album, it kind of makes sense, because it starts off from this real like stripped down, very ethereal kind of place, and then it builds up to this, like it gets like progressively bigger and bigger and bigger, and more stuff starts happening, and it starts getting heavier. But it's not heavier in the Meshuggah heavy. It's like heavy sonically. There's just a lot going on, and it's a lot of movement, but it doesn't sound like guitars. It's weird, really hard to explain, because I've listened to it tons of times now, and there's not really any riffs in there that I could sort of just hum to you and go, yeah, that one. Which on a lot of their albums you can, because a lot of their riffs used to be super catchy.
Well, they were like caveman riffs. It was like dun 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 dun, and there's not a whole lot of that anymore. Yeah, and I
like it. It's more like
I like it.
It kind of reminds me of like Mogwai, the way they use guitars, where it's sort of like almost like a tonal instrument. So it's creating like different layers of tones on top of it. The lead guitar is really good in it. The guy's all over the place with lead, like all the time. He's just start doing something to the extent that it almost in parts sounds like a keyboard, like Rick Wakeman or something, just going underneath. It
does.
The rhythm. But yeah, I gave it 3 out of 5, which was a bit stingy, but that's only because it's out of 5. If you put it in the context out of 10, that would be like a 7.5, 8 out of 10, which is pretty good. I've never given an album 10 out of 10 that I've reviewed on the site, so 8 out of 10 is pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And I think the main thing is that my main takeaway was that I think it's because they're going to get a lot of flack for it, I think, from their kind of like hardcore fans from the first few albums.
I think so too.
But the point thing is, I think a band at this stage, because they're like 5 albums in now, you need to be able to challenge their own conventions, and I think that's what they've done here. Because if you don't challenge the convention of what your band's based around, then things is going to get stale. And I even did my usual thing of slagging off the latest Metallica album in the review, because it's so boring and obvious and pedestrian and unimaginative that it didn't need to. Their back catalogue would be better if that album didn't exist. Whereas Pallbearer, they've just stepped away from what they've done traditionally and taken the concept of what they kind of do and how they approach music and composition and just moved it into a completely different territory. And it's experimental and it's risky, but I think it's a really like rewarding listen. But it requires you to listen to it a lot, well, it's kind of like a few times. You can't just listen to it once and go, oh yeah, it's all right. It needs, multiple sessions of going through it, listening carefully. And it's very rare you get albums like that these days. So I kind of appreciate that. Somebody who likes listening to music and getting into it. It's really great for that.
It's like the Melvin's album that we reviewed last month.
I love that album.
I mean, the first song, it's all in a major key. Like, what?
And it has
like you're going to open up the album with a major key? Really?
It has the best breakdown at 5 minutes 30 of any song I've heard in the last 12 months.
Oh,
I absolutely love that bit. That's so good.
The longest song too. Yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah,
yeah.
But it's very good. And if you want to read the full review, it's on the site now, so you can check it out. And I would recommend you listen to the album as well if you haven't already, because it's a really good album sonically. There's a lot going on. There's a lot to listen to. If it was a cheese, it would be a very, very complex, smelly cheese. And if you like cheese, you know that's a good thing.
Definitely something rare.
Yeah, rare and veiny.
Well, I think that's going to wrap us up for this week. Tune in next week. We don't really have anything planned yet. We're going to see how the week plays out, see if any new guitar news drops as we get closer to NAMM. I think some more stuff is probably going to be coming out next week. So I'm not going to give any promises yet. We'll see what happens. And we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Electric Jam Podcast.